During World War II, the most feared bombing unit of the entire Soviet Air Force wasn't made of men. It was a group of young women who flew in crop duster planes made of wood and fabric. And the Germans were so terrified of them, they called them the Night Witches. This is their incredible, unbelievable, and absolutely true story. When the Soviet Union entered the war, countless women volunteered to fight. But the military establishment, like most around the world, was reluctant to put women in combat roles. That all changed thanks to Marina Raskova, a famous Soviet aviator. She used her influence to persuade Stalin to create 3 all-female Air Force regiments. One of them, the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, would soon become legendary. The women who joined were incredibly young. Most were just volunteers, students between 17 and 26 years old, many straight out of high school or university. They were filled with patriotism and a fierce desire to defend their homeland. But the equipment they were given was almost laughable if it wasn't so dangerous. They flew the Polikarpov PO-2 biplane. This aircraft was designed in the 1920s as a crop duster and training plane. It was made of plywood and canvas stretched over a wooden frame. It was slow, clunky, and completely obsolete by the time the war started. Imagine climbing into an open cockpit in the dead of the Russian winter, wearing gear that was often oversized and designed for men. Your only protection from the freezing wind and enemy fire is a thin layer of fabric. These planes had no armor, no radios for communication, and often no parachutes because the pilots believed they were too heavy and useless at their low altitudes. If a single incendiary bullet hit the canvas, the entire plane would go up in flames like a matchstick. They were flying coffins. But in the hands of these women, these flying coffins became one of the most effective and terrifying weapons on the Eastern Front. So, how did they do it? How did these young women in outdated planes strike so much fear into the hearts of the German army? They turned their plane's weaknesses into strengths. The PO-2 was slow. Its top speed was slower than the stall speed of the German Messerschmitt fighters. This meant that if a German pilot tried to tail them, they'd have to slow down so much they'd risk falling out of the sky. The Night Witches could make tight turns that the faster, heavier German planes couldn't follow. They were nimble ghosts in the dark. But their most famous tactic was what earned them their nickname. They flew their missions exclusively at night. To avoid being detected by sound, they developed a truly terrifying technique. As they approached their target, the pilot would cut the engine completely. The plane would then glide silently through the darkness toward the German encampments below. The only thing the soldiers on the ground would hear was a soft, eerie whooshing sound as the wind passed over the canvas wings. It sounded like a broomstick sweeping through the night sky. And then, moments later, explosions would erupt from nowhere. To the terrified, sleep-deprived German soldiers, it seemed like they were being haunted by witches on broomsticks. And so, the name was born. Die Nachthexen, the Night Witches. This psychological impact was immense. The constant, unpredictable threat from the sky meant German soldiers never got a full night's rest. The fear was as much of a weapon as the bombs themselves. The Germans spread rumors that the Soviets were giving these women special injections to give them the night vision of a cat. The reality was far more mundane and far more impressive. It was sheer skill, practice, and bravery. The missions themselves were grueling and relentless. Each crew, consisting of a pilot and a navigator, would fly multiple sorties every single night, sometimes as many as 8 to 15. After each mission, they'd land, refuel, rearm their bombs by hand, and take off again, all in a matter of minutes. Sleep was a luxury they couldn't afford. They would often fly for hours on end, returning to their base just before dawn, exhausted and frozen. Their faces would be numb from the cold, and in winter, frostbite was a constant danger. Navigation was just as primitive as their planes. They didn't have radar or advanced GPS systems. They used maps, compasses, and stopwatches. The navigator, sitting in the front cockpit, had to guide them through the pitch-black night over enemy territory, relying on landmarks she could barely see below. One small mistake could send them miles off course or directly into a barrage of anti-aircraft fire. And the danger was constant. The sky was filled with searchlights and flak. If a night witch was caught in a searchlight, she became a sitting duck for every gun on the ground. The pilots learned to fly in formations of 3. 2 planes would act as decoys, intentionally drawing the searchlights in enemy fire. This would give the 3rd plane a window of opportunity to sneak through, drop its bombs, and get out. Then they would switch roles. It was an incredibly risky strategy that required perfect coordination and absolute trust in each other. Despite these incredible odds, their effectiveness was undeniable. Over the course of the war, the Night Witches flew more than 24,000 missions. They dropped over 23,000 tons of bombs. They destroyed countless German supply depots, fuel dumps, bridges, railway lines, and command posts. They were a constant thorn in the side of the German war machine on the Eastern Front. The German command grew to respect and fear them. They were so effective that any German pilot who shot down a Night Witch was automatically awarded the prestigious Iron Cross medal. Think about that. The highest military honor was offered for shooting down a plane made of wood and fabric, flown by a teenage girl. That's how much of a threat they were. Their casualty rate was high. Over 30 of their members were killed in action, but their spirit never broke. When a crew was lost, their friends would mourn, but then they would get back in their planes and fly even more fiercely, dedicating their next missions to their fallen comrades. They were a sisterhood, forged in the freezing skies of the Eastern Front. They shared everything from their meager rations to their deepest fears. This bond was their greatest strength. By the end of the war, the 588th Regiment had become the most highly decorated female unit in the Soviet Air Force. Every surviving pilot had flown hundreds of missions. 23 of them were awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, the nation's highest honor for bravery. Their commander, Yevdokia Bershanskaya, was the only woman to ever be awarded the Order of Suvorov. When the war ended and they flew their final mission over Berlin in 1945, they had left an indelible mark on history. But after their victory parade in Moscow, they were largely forgotten. Their regiment was disbanded, and many of them returned to civilian life, their incredible contributions overlooked for decades. It's only in recent years that their story has been rediscovered and celebrated around the world. The legacy of the Night Witches isn't just about their military achievements. It's a story about defying expectations. It's a story of how a group of determined young women, armed with little more than courage and obsolete planes, became a symbol of resistance and a terrifying legend. They proved that heroism isn't measured by the sophistication of your weapons, but by the strength of your spirit. They were the Night Witches, and their story is a powerful reminder that heroes can come from the most unexpected of places. Thank you so much for watching. If you were as inspired by this story as I was, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. See you in the next one.